Hello and welcome to Global News Today, bringing you exclusive interviews with leading experts every weekday here on Arabiya English. I'm Burges Watson, and coming up on today's programme, thousands of Palestinians begin returning home across Gaza as the Israeli military confirms that a ceasefire has now come into effect. In this edition, we'll be live in Gaza to find out what conditions are like there on the ground. We'll also be speaking to a former advisor to President Trump as the US president prepares to fly in to the region. All of that to come on today's edition of GNT. Hello and welcome to the programme. It has barely been 24 hours since Israel and Hamas reached a ceasefire deal. And with the truce now in effect, Palestinians are beginning to return to what's left of their homes in parts of Gaza. Well, reports say that many are coming home to scenes of total destruction. Well, Israeli forces have now pulled back to the lines that were set by President Donald Trump's plan. That's according to the IDF. With regards to the hostages, President Trump says that Hamas has until Monday or Tuesday to release them.
We ended the war in Gaza and really, on a much bigger basis, created peace. And I think it's going to be a lasting peace, hopefully an everlasting peace. Peace in the Middle East. We secured the release of all of the remaining hostages, and they should be released on Monday or Tuesday. Getting them is a complicated process. I'd rather not tell you what they have to do to get them. There are places you don't want to be, but we are getting the hostages back on Tuesday, Monday or Tuesday, and that'll be a day of joy. I'm going to try and make a trip over. We're going to try and get over there.
President Trump speaking there. Well, we can cross now to Gabriel Sawma, who is a former member of President Trump's advisory board. He joins us now from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. So the ceasefire has now come into effect. I mean, a lot has happened in the last couple of days. What's your reaction to what's been achieved so far?
Well, I think the credit goes to the President Trump, who worked from day one on this issue, especially releasing the hostages, which is a very important topic here in the United States. As you know, the American people would like to see their friends coming out of jail under Hamas. And the other thing is that the president was able to have an agreement among the parties involved in this conflict. And I think everything would be fine. Within Monday or Tuesday, we're going to see the hostages coming out of their jail. And we hope peace would prevail in the area.
I mean, clearly the situation is fragile. That's inevitable given what the last 24 months have had in store for all parties. Do you see any obstacles? Do you see any scenario in which even hostilities could resume?
There is no guarantee that this agreement would last for a long time. As you said, the situation is fragile right now. It's on edge. All parties are on edge at this moment. Well, but the president is going to work hard to make peace possible because he has plans for the Middle East. As you know, the Abrahamic Accords. He wants to go ahead with these plans, and in order to do that, he has to establish peace first in the Middle East.
You mentioned this in your first answer about the prisoners that are going to be released. And Israel has published, we're told, some of the lists of prisoners who could be released. Could these lists of prisoners end up being one of the early hurdles to progress here?
Well, according to the news from there, it seems that these prisoners these hostages are located in more than one place. And therefore, it's a matter of time for the Palestinians, for Hamas to release them. And once they are released, everything would be fine.
But with regards to who's on the list and who's not on the list of Palestinian prisoners, for example, could that be something that generates counter demands from Hamas, for example?
I think there is an agreement now that Hamas has to release them. So the president is going to insist on this. Otherwise, they would be violating the agreement. Therefore, we are all expecting that all the hostages should be released.
Now, it's been reported that President Trump had to apply considerable pressure to Prime Minister Netanyahu. And I'm wondering what you make of reports that have circulated that relations between the two men have been severely tested. What would you say to that?
Well, indeed, it was tested from day one when Netanyahu came to Washington, D.C. And it seems that the president forced him to talk to the Emir of Qatar. It happened in the White House, and the script was written by the president, by his team, and Benjamin Netanyahu had to spell it out and talk to the Emir of Qatar.
Do you think it's true that the two men have, had some pretty major disagreements during the course of the last few weeks?
There are major disagreements between, and that has to do with the policies of the United States, especially President Trump's policy. The president wants to see peace over there because he has a larger plan for the Middle East. As I mentioned earlier, the Abrahamic Accords require that there has to be peace between Israel and its neighbors. And so the president is arm twisting the situation over there to make sure that peace prevails. And Benjamin Netanyahu agree to have a peace in the region.
Some people have warned that this war has isolated Israel internationally, and I think very hard to dispute that. Do you think that isolation can be reversed?
I think so. I think if the Prime Minister of Israel agrees to the deal that the president has offered, I think peace would prevail over there. Remember that the Abrahamic Accords requires that all the countries in the Middle East have to agree to a peace agreement between Israel and these countries. And therefore, once, and the president wants that to happen as soon as possible. So once that starts to work, then you're going to see peace in the Middle East.
And just lastly, Mr. Sawma, before we wrap up, I mean, given the role you say President Trump has played in all of this, and it was announced today that the Nobel Peace Prize is not going to be awarded to Mr. Trump this year, do you think perhaps he'd be a suitable candidate for next year, especially given what you're saying about how we can expect considerable progress in the next few months on the Abraham Accords?
I think we are getting closer to that. Remember, before October 7, on the day before October 7, Saudi Arabia was that close, very close, to have a peace agreement with Israel. And then October 7 happened in 2023, and everything was dismantled. And so the president is reworking on that subject and convince Saudi Arabia to start negotiations with Israel on a peaceful agreement on the recognition, mutual recognition. And once that happens, peace would prevail in the area.
Okay, well, we appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Gabriel Sawma, former member of President Trump's advisory board. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you.
Well, we can speak now to Ghada al-Kurd, who is a journalist who joins us now from Deir al-Balah, which is right in the middle of Gaza, halfway between Khan Yunis and Gaza City. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. I can see it looks as though daily life is sort of returning to where you are. What is the mood like today?
Well, today the ceasefire has been agreed today, and people, they are walking in the streets, relieved, relaxed. There is no sounds of airstrikes, explosions, or even Israeli drones on the sky now. People, they can walk without any problem. They can walk in the local streets between the markets and street sellers. They can buy their goods. Actually, we have some kind of plenty of food here in central Gaza rather than Gaza City. We can see people walking, buying some vegetables, some fruits. Also, the movement today is very huge because all the displaced people who have been displaced from Gaza City in the last few weeks, they are preparing themselves again to return to Gaza after the last Israeli offensive operation over there.
And when was the last time you heard a gunfire or an explosion? Has it been completely quiet today?
Today, before 12 o'clock, actually, we heard lots of explosion, and it seems like it was a cover for the Israeli troops that they want to withdraw from some areas in Gaza City along the borders. We are not far away from Salah ad-Din streets, which is the line, the yellow line, which was published among the plan of the ceasefire. Today also we hear these explosions and shellings in early morning, but after that, since afternoon, actually we didn't hear anything till this moment.
And are you hearing from people about them returning to their homes? Because we're being told that a lot of the homes that were there before the 7th of October 2023 have now been destroyed. Is that something you're hearing from a lot of the people you're talking to?
Exactly. Most of the buildings here, neighborhoods, even in eastern areas of Gaza Strip, all of these neighborhoods have been destroyed. And people, some of them, they couldn't return to their houses, but they took the risk, actually, just from maybe far distance, just to see what is happening to their neighborhoods or areas. But they still want to go back and return, even in a tent. They want to stay and to rebuild their houses, as they don't want to leave Gaza. They want to stay here in Gaza and rebuild their houses in the upcoming future.
I can see some people behind you who were waving a moment ago, looking very happy. I mean, that seems to really capture the mood there today. I'm assuming people are feeling celebratory there.
Exactly. Yesterday was celebration for the people. Some of them, they opened some fires on the air that to express their feelings that this war has ended after 2 years of fighting. Also, we heard some music, some traditional Palestinian music were played around the area here. People are cheerful, joyful, and they want actually their sufferings to be ended, and they want to return to their life before the October 7th.
And when you were saying earlier people have gone to do sort of shopping and their sort of daily chores, are the shelves still quite empty in shops, and are markets still quite empty in terms of what supplies they have, or has some food aid, has some supplies come through to you?
Actually, it depends on the humanitarian aid trucks, which is entering from Israeli crossing. I mean, here in Deir el-Balah in central Gaza, we can see lots of vegetables, lots of goods here, and people, they are actually, and with the decrease of the prices, people, they are all the time want to eat, want to find food after the starvation that hit Gaza city in a couple of months ago. And actually, they want to recover from the starvation, the weakness that they have went through. And now we can, as you see, some street sellers who are selling people some kinds of vegetables that we didn't see along the fighting, along the war. It's better rather than Gaza City, as you can see here.
When you talk to people, are most people saying that they've suffered the effects of hunger, malnutrition during the course of these last few months? Is that something that everyone in Gaza has been through?
It can be shown on their bodies, actually. Most of the people, they lost lots of weight, and they didn't, most of the people, we couldn't recognize them because they lost lots of weight, and it affected their mental and physical health, and they even, like, they don't have any kind of transportation. Most of the time they were walking in the streets because of the lack of fuel. Yeah, it's clear on their bodies, on everyone. Everyone was affected by this starvation, and still they are recovering. The amount of humanitarian aid that entering Gaza now is not enough, but we hope with the ceasefire that this amount of humanitarian aid will increase, and people, they can eat well and they can recover from the starvation and malnutrition.
Yeah, I can see just behind you someone selling tomatoes and some other fresh vegetables, so that must be a welcome scene. Presumably things like that were not available until now. I mean, when you think about it, Ghada, I mean, 2 years of suffering, 2 years of constant displacement to different parts of the Gaza Strip. I mean, how does it feel to think to yourself, it's all over?
Actually, it's been a hard experience, a hard journey for almost 2 million Palestinians here. All of them, they were displaced. We can say 2 million people, they were displaced inside tents. Many times, maybe more than 10 times they were displaced. And they had to take all of their stuff with them, moving from a place to place, even without transportation, without cash money to pay for any transportation mean. But now, maybe this will be the last time for the Palestinians here that they could just stay in their places, and they will not go inside another displacement experience.
Okay, well, we really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Thank you very much indeed. Ghada al-Kurd, journalist in Deir al-Balah in Gaza Strip. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. Well, we can speak now to Pascal Confavreux, who is a spokesperson for the French Foreign Ministry in Paris. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. First of all, I want to talk to you about the Gaza conference that's been taking place in Paris. The foreign ministers of lots of countries have been there, the US, the UK, Saudi Arabia, to name but a few. And the goal, we're told, was to push forward the Trump plan. I want to ask you what emerged from that conference and what were President Macron's main messages?
Thank you. Yeah, the meeting was introduced by President Macron. It was then conducted by our Minister of Foreign Affairs, Jean-Noël Barrot, and it gathered 5 European countries and 5 Arab countries. They talked about governance, security, and reconstruction. On security, one of the main things they discussed was the force of stabilization, which should be under the mandate of the United Nations Security Council. And the goal was to see which countries were ready to contribute. You had different types of contributions, from training to sometimes troops, and how we could achieve to have a mandate by the United Nations Security Council. Because if you have a mandate by the United Nations, it makes it much more much stronger, and to have other countries join this stabilization force. And this stabilization force will be very useful at the moment when the Israeli force go out of the Gaza territory.
What sort of a future does France envisage for Gaza?
The absolute priority is to have the release of hostages, which is to be happening soon now, to have the resuming of the humanitarian aid, and of course the total ceasefire, as it has been decided in the hours before. And we completely, we think it's a completely an agreement which is historical, and we fully support it. But we need now to think the day after. And we are ready to contribute to the stabilization force. And we are also very vigilant about the future governments. There will be a transitory governance on the Gaza territory. But what is also very important is that the role of the Palestinian Authority on this Gaza territory in the future has to be recognized, as it is in the American plan, but has to be operationalized in the future and for a Palestinian Authority, which will be itself also modernized as it has been decided in the Saudi-French plan that was adopted by the United Nations last September.
So clearly, Mr. Confavreux, there are numerous questions and concerns about Gaza's future governance and, as you say, stabilization. And when you say France is willing to help, what sort of a role do you see France playing here?
France stands ready to go out of this cycle of violence. It's exactly what we have done in the last 10 months with the Saudis to take the two-state solution out of the mortal danger it was in, frankly, last year. So we have now a first step with this ceasefire and the release of the hostages and the humanitarian going back to Gaza. Now we have to operationalize the second step for the governance, for the security, and for the reconstruction. And we have to, in the end, put all these pieces together to build on that dynamic so that it doesn't stop at this ceasefire. Otherwise, it could be very fragile. So we have to put everything together, and we think that thinking of the day after helped having this ceasefire signed because the ceasefire was very hard to obtain because the parties were not really ready to say, okay, when the arms stop, what do we do after? And so now that we helped thinking this day after, this ceasefire has been signed. So that's all these pieces that we're putting together and this dynamic that we want to push in favor of the American plan.
France was one of the countries that announced in the last few weeks that it recognized a Palestinian state. I'm wondering if you think that made a difference towards getting us to the point we're at now. And the second part of my question is, do you think the momentum is now there to turn this idea of a Palestinian state into a reality?
Oh, definitely the momentum is here. We have to seize it. The thing was for us to use this card of the recognition of the Palestinian state to obtain very tangible results. That's what we did in the last months, to have the condemnation of Hamas, to have the reform of the Palestinian Authority, to have some very strong commitments for a regional cohesion with Israel and with the countries around it. Now we have a new momentum with this ceasefire, and we have to build on it.
But President Macron sounds concerned. I mean, everyone's concerned. So much could happen in the weeks ahead. We need to even see if the ceasefire will hold. President Macron calling out settlements, particularly settlements in the West Bank, as being what he called an existential threat to a future Palestinian state. What is France's position on settlements?
Our position is very, very clear on that. It is a red line. West Bank is not where Hamas lies, and it should not be having these settlements, and we condemn them day after day. And the last one being the E1, which has a major risk because it could endanger the unity of the West Bank. So we are very strong on that. And what we also tell the Israeli government is that, for instance, the Emiratis are very also against it, and that it could endanger Abraham Accords that were signed during the first Trump administration. And so we also hear that the Trump administration, the second Trump administration, would be very against such a move.
There have been some very tense diplomatic exchanges between Paris and Israel. And I'm sure that's kept you and people in your ministry extremely busy the last few weeks and months. But how would you characterize the current state of relations between France and Israel?
The relations are ongoing. They are very demanding. And we tell each other what we really think. But the relations have never stopped. And that's very important for us also, that to keep on these discussions and to tell them where we have strong disagreements. And we have strong disagreements on the settlements, E1, for instance, but also very strong disagreements on the war that was waged on Gaza and which had, in our view, no military objective in the last weeks.
Would you say relations have been damaged?
These relations are ongoing and demanding. And for instance, for the ministerial meeting, for the Paris conference on Gaza yesterday, we had informed the Israeli government on what we were going to do and what were our intentions and what the outcomes would be. But just exactly as we had done during these 10 months on the two-state solution that we co-led with the Saudi partners.
There's been huge progress the last few days. We've got this Sharm el-Sheikh agreement. There's now a ceasefire in effect in Gaza. Hostages due to be released. I mean, your reaction to that, and also if you could just tell us, what's France's role? How do you view France as having played a part in all of this?
Our role was really to take this two-state solution back on track. That was not the case last year. And frankly, last year, if you would have told us that we would be in this situation now, we wouldn't have believed it. We have created a dynamic of 10 states recognizing Palestine and also a dynamic of having Arab countries and 142 countries condemning very clearly Hamas, the October 7th attack, and having this reform of the Palestinian Authority. A lot of this plan was in the American plan that was proposed on the 29th of September. And our role was to support this American plan, and now it's to help this second stage of this American plan. That's how we see our role there, and it has been a long efforts by the French diplomacy led by Jean-Noël Barrot and by our President Emmanuel Macron.
Okay, well, we really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Pascal Confavreux, spokesperson for the French Foreign Ministry. Thank you very much for your time, sir. That is all we have time for on Global News today. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Be sure to join us again on Monday for more exclusive interviews. Until then, bye-bye.